Welcome back. This is The Debater. We're ready to increase the intensity of the next round a little bit more, as the proposition and the opposition are now ready to move on to the face-off round. Proposition, opposition, you may begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition stand in their house. They stated about 8 points that has to be proven to win this debate, as in their argument. So in that case, in their argument, they were elaborating on the point that the energy source should be able to cater everyone. And that's why we do say that nuclear energy would be a good way to cater everyone.
Point of information,
yes,
sir.
Madam.
So when it costs almost 9 to 10 billion to 11 billion to build one nuclear power plant and over 1 billion to just dispose of nuclear waste, do you think countries like Ethiopia and Guatemala and Chad can actually afford to have nuclear energy, sir?
Madam, just because the cost is high, although the initial capital cost building a nuclear weapon is very high, but the maintenance and the running costs are relatively low when considering about other energy sources, because that would be the best option that we stand in the proposition that we can give. Yes,
Point
madam.
of information, sir. So don't you believe when you're talking about best options, we also have renewable resources?
Even nuclear energy can be taken as renewable resources. It can be taken as a renewable source as long as the waste that is sent out by the nuclear sources that can be taken into consideration, and that is also used again and again for the productivity of energy. No, thank you, madam. And the first speaker was talking about the energy market that would arise when you are talking about the increase of energy crisis. So in this case, as I told before, even though the cost is really high, it is a very good thing to be afforded on this market, because this can actually be the best answer that we can give standing in the proposition. And
point of information, sir.
Yes, madam.
How can it be the best answer when there is no efficient system of waste disposal that all countries can invest in, sir?
Madam, it is the very most reliable source as long as the average lifespan of a nuclear reactor is about 40 years, which is like you can plan ahead about 60 years in that case with the development of the technology. And then again, the second speaker brought out saying that the disposal waste can be harmful, and also about nuclear weaponry. Just because a nation would develop nuclear energy sources does not mean that the nuclear weaponry would increase. Even though, just imagine that we would not develop nuclear energy, and in that case, do you think that the other countries would stay alone without developing nuclear weaponry? There are countries in this world where they develop nuclear weaponry and they are trying to overpower the world. And in this case, yes, madam.
So, this is merely an assumption on your part. What guarantee do you give us that countries will not take one step further and enrich their uranium to make nuclear weapons?
Madam, in this case, we cannot live in a riskful... I get your point saying that we cannot live in a riskful society. But in that case, do you believe that there are countries where they develop nuclear weaponry? There are countries who are trying to empower the world by having nuclear weaponry already. Just because we do not develop nuclear energy does not mean that they would stop developing that source of energy. And then again, about the efficiency and reliability, where the nuclear will be stood up against all other energy sources, as long as that is one of the most useful ways. In that case, the sustainability is and about the energy market, it is actually at a very good standard, where we being the proposition, we can stand up and say that nuclear energy would be the best energy source that we can give us the global solution to be able for other people also to handle. Thank you very much.
Honourable panel of judges, members of the proposition and members of the opposition. During the course of the debate, it has become evident that nuclear energy is definitely not the solution to the global energy crisis. Because one, it is not sustainable when it produces 90 to 140 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, when it costs $10 to $11 billion to build just one nuclear power plant, when countries have to put in more than $1 billion just to clean up the waste, and when it is an apparent threat to global security and peace. And also, ladies and gentlemen, we have to keep in mind the changing global attitudes, because given the incidents such as Fukushima and Chernobyl and the other list of leakages and accidents, countries like Germany, Switzerland, Japan, Italy have completely halted investment in the nuclear energy sector. And also, we believe that each country should decide how they plan to face the energy crisis. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there is no uniform solution. Nuclear energy should be set aside as the last possible solution. Instead, countries should invest in renewable resources because it is sustainable, because it is unlimited in supply, and because it does not pose a threat to national security. Yes, sir.
Madam, don't you think that according to the proposals that have been agreed with the nuclear energy sources, that they have proved that nuclear energy can, nuclear sources of energy can create cheap electricity, that they can give cheap electricity. So in that case, won't it be a positive impact on any of the governments?
I'm sorry, sir, I do not agree with you, given that, as I have repeated in my case, it costs a lot just to start one nuclear plant. So if it becomes a global solution, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to install so many nuclear power plants, and countries like Sri Lanka, countries like Pakistan will not be able to afford the initial cost. So we cannot expect them to continue with it. Yes, sir.
But considering about the cost, are you ready to give away the fact that nuclear energy would be a good solution for this energy crisis?
Given the security, the threat that it poses to national security, given that there is no proper disposal of waste, given that countries do not have access to the capacity and expertise, I'm sorry, I cannot agree with you, sir. And also, moving on, we have renewable resources such as hydropower, which costs only $2 to $4 million just to build one hydropower plant. We have solar power, which releases only 10 to 40 grams of CO2 kilowatt per hour. We have geothermal energy. We have wind energy. Yes, sir.
Madam, I agree with you that we have all those sources, but we be able to have all those sources. We are already having an energy crisis all around the world. So that is the reason why we are trying to find a global solution for this matter.
Our global solution, ladies and gentlemen, is diversification. As my next speaker will elaborate, we cannot put all our eggs into one basket and take the risk. We have to spread the risk. Countries should face the energy crisis depending on the capacity and expertise and finance that they have. They can also improve and renovate their electricity systems. Thereby, they will not face the mismanagement in the distribution of energy. And also, they should have transparency and better organization. Then countries like Pakistan will find out that they can better solve their energy crisis. And also, ladies and gentlemen, we talk that monopolization of the energy market will lead to the energy crisis, as it has already done. Countries should make stricter legislation to oppose this. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, only 2% of the global energy came from nuclear energy in 2008. This shows that there is enough and more time for countries to stop investing in an unfeasible, unsustainable and expensive solution like nuclear energy and invest in more feasible solutions like renewable resources and improving their electricity systems. Thank you.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start my rebuttal asking what source of renewable sources are this opposition relying on? Is this the so-called solar cells, which we have to put about 156 square meters of solar cell to give a sufficient amount of power to this world? Or maybe it's the wind, which is 726 square meters of windmills to give the sufficient energy. Or maybe the biomass, which is 10 times of a small country called Iota to give the required stand. Or maybe the hydropower, which is completely unreliable as in the situation of our country itself today. Yes, sir.
So rather than investing and bettering these solutions in order to bring about a higher level of energy, you are proposing as side proposition to invest $35,771 million US dollars in just cleaning up on what nuclear energy brings out. Is that what you're proposing, sir?
Sir, I come to that point. Yes, you bring out that offensive point about this certain nuclear energy is not renewable. Sir, please live in the 21st century. What the France is doing, what the France is exactly doing at this right moment with the 77% electric capacity coming from nuclear energy is they are renewing their nuclear energy. They actually at the moment they are taking the 95% energy that is wasted as a resource material from that certain energy from that certain nuclear model. So, sir, you still think that it will those waste should be disposed?
So, question, sir?
Yes.
So, do you realize that France's social attitude towards nuclear energy changed after the Fukushima incident, and the government of France has actually changed its policy along with Germany and is now moving away from nuclear energy? Isn't your stance very fundamentally flawed and your statement completely irrelevant?
Sir, may I quote this quote from the Japanese parliament saying that Fukushima incident is so early a man-made error. They have clearly stated that Fukushima is just an error made by the man because they have just cut the safety requirements for the nuclear plant. Just because some man did an error, do we have to stop going forward in the future? Do we have to stop seeing the future and making our energy sources now so we can accommodate in the future? Yes, sir.
So you're going back to the status quo and using nuclear energy instead of fossil fuels, and thereby leaving the next generation to deal with the problem and sweeping the problem under the carpet. Is that what you're doing, sir?
Sir, I clearly mentioned how the future generations do not have to sweep under the carpet, because clearly the wastage of nuclear is now controlled according to 21st century internet connection says with reliable sources that it can be contained in anti-corrosive containers as long as they want. So the future generations are perfectly reliable from those waste. Yes, sir.
So we are going to utilize the ground that we have, the earth that we have for the next 25,000 years to clean up the waste we are going to use in the nuclear industry.
So when I mentioned it's a contain, I didn't mention that it's a contain on the ground, over the ground, below the ground. Not like that, sir. It can be maybe near the Earth's crust. That container can be near the Earth's crust, over the crust, or even down in the oceans. So this can please move on to the 21st century. And yes, I must move on to this manipulation thing that you opposition brought up. So about the manipulation thing, we strongly believe that the International Atomic Energy Agency have actually given the sufficient cause about the manipulation. So, sorry, sir, I'll take my time. And giving all those requirements is clearly possible, clearly seen that we have actually met all your reasons, all the facts you have asked to make a certain energy source a reliable solution in the global. So we believe strongly that our solution as nuclear energy is a sustainable, a good solution to the global energy crisis. Thank you.
Good day, honorable panel of judges, members of side.